There's a man named Greg Caton who was kidnapped, abducted by U.S. authorities in Ecuador. This story broke first in 2009, that he was abducted. And he was, oh man, this is an incredible story. The U.S. State Department had operatives working in Ecuador. They bribed the local police there. They had men with guns intercept Greg Caton in his driveway. They shoved him into a vehicle, drove him to a city called Guayaquil, where they, after a little bit of a hearing, where a local judge said, you got to set him free. He hasn't violated any laws. U.S. State Department officials thrust him onto an American Airlines airplane. He was flown back to Miami, and then he was incarcerated in Louisiana and Texas. He served almost 2 years in federal prison for the so-called crime of selling, quote, unapproved drugs, which were nothing more than plant-based herbal cures for cancer, a topical cure that really works, by the way. It really does cure skin cancer, and I have numerous testimonials on that, even from esteemed scientists, including a former NASA astronaut who has used that product. But the point is, Greg recently got out of prison, all right? He's back in Ecuador as of right now. And that's a whole story by itself of how he got back to Ecuador. Now that he's in Ecuador, he and some of my contacts in Ecuador, because I used to live there, have been able to pull together some documentation that now proves that his removal from Ecuador was highly illegal. Now, for those of you watching here on prisonplanet.tv, there's a graphic that you'll see. It's the Policía Nacional del Ecuador. It's a migration movement document. This is a recording of where Gregory Caton was at every time in history, in other words, moving in and out of the country of Ecuador. Now, if he had been extradited through any kind of legal process, then this document would have shown that he left the country legally. There would be a line on here that says that he flew out of Guayaquil. Instead, there is no line on this document indicating that he never left Ecuador legally. He was illegally removed by U.S. operatives, criminals working for the FDA, for the State Department, criminals who engaged in an international abduction of a U.S. citizen who was guilty of no crime in Ecuador whatsoever. Now, think about this, folks, and think about the fact that you probably haven't heard this story before because the mainstream media isn't covering this at all. They absolutely refuse to cover it. I think this is one of the biggest stories of the week because it shows the criminality of the U.S. government and just the desperation that it is showing in trying to intimidate those who promote natural cancer therapies, especially ones that really work. Now, Greg Caton is hopefully going to be joining us at a future show date here on the Alex Jones Show. I've also interviewed him on Natural News. We're going to have an interview published there. Watch for more stories on Greg Caton. Just know that as of right now, after serving 2 years in prison, he is safe and sound in Ecuador. Now, here's another interesting thing. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration was able to get Gregory Caton listed on Interpol. Yeah, Interpol, red flagged on Interpol. Now, the red flag status is normally reserved for individuals who are international war criminals or mass murderers or mass rapists. I mean, we're talking about serious, hardcore criminals. But Greg Caton was listed on there, and they said that he was guilty of drug crimes. What drugs? Herbs? Really? Is that what you're talking about, drug crimes? But it gets even worse. They were also able to get Greg Caton listed on a Parade magazine list of America's most wanted criminals, which featured none other than Osama bin Laden. And just underneath Osama bin Laden, you see the picture of Greg Caton. Right. That's how desperate they are. You can't sell herbs that actually cure cancer in America. Now, we're going to cover a lot of topics other than just health, by the way. We're going to cover politics. We're going to cover freedom, many other issues. But I just wanted to mention that about Greg Caton because you got to know the truth about this story. In fact, just search Greg Caton, C-A-T-O-N, online if you want to get more about this story. Now, let me fill you in. We've just got a couple minutes left here. Let me fill you in on Kippy Miller and Truly Raw Gourmet. Check out their website at trulyrawgourmet.com. This company was recently intimidated by the California Department of Agriculture, the same people who raided Rawsome Foods. And it turns out that this company, Truly Raw Gourmet, provides a frozen sorbet dessert to Rawsome Foods and even to Whole Foods. It's sold at Whole Foods. But the people who conducted the Rawsome Food raids, in my opinion, are such morons. They thought frozen coconut sorbet was raw dairy. So they raided, well, it's not really a raid. They showed up at Kippy Miller's house, flashing a badge. They weren't toting guns in this case, all right? So maybe it's not a raid. It was more like, here we are, here's our badge, let us in, we're going to shut you down. And they did shut her down. And when they realized that she wasn't selling raw dairy products, that it was only made out of coconut milk that was frozen, they were just flabbergasted. And they said, well, we're going to come back and give you some surprise raids in the future. Or not, I'm sorry, not raids, inspections. Let me correct that. Surprise inspections in the future because, and get this, because your product has a, quote, likeness to ice cream. Yeah, it looks a little bit like ice cream. Therefore, you're going to be inspected without notice just because we hate raw dairy so much in L.A. County. We hate raw goat's milk so much. We hate raw cheese so much in L.A. County that we're going to inspect you and shut you down just because your product even looks like ice cream. That's how crazy things have become in L.A. County. It's insane, yeah. Well, stay with us here on The Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back with more information about food freedom. And coming up, guest Dr. Andrew Wakefield at the bottom of the hour. I'm Mike Adams here on The Alex Jones Show. Stay with us.